Naomi, did you say 103,000 structures?
The Palestinian Authority, since 2009, publicly in a declared program of creating a de facto state called the Fayyad Plan. Since 2009, the Palestinian Authority has used those massive resources simply to annex, physically take over Area C, the area placed under full Israeli jurisdiction. Today, there are over 103,000 illegal structures built by the Palestinian Authority with foreign money on Area C.
So go on over to Patreon, subscribe to Shoulder for just $10 a month. We're grateful for our sponsor, Israel 365 News, which is the place for you to go and get your news and information before going to anyone else. Go on over to Israel, the numbers 365news.com to check out some of their articles, and be sure to read Rabbi Pesach and my columns. Pesach, each and every week, we have some incredible products and initiatives happening at Israel 365. What are we promoting and supporting today?
Well, what we're promoting is free of charge this week. We're just asking people to register for a very important webinar that Israel 365 is going to be hosting this coming Sunday, just a few days away, a very important webinar. It will be held at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. in Israel. But if you register for the webinar, it does not matter if you can't make that time, because by registering, you will guarantee that you get an email to your inbox with a link to the full webinar immediately after it airs. So you don't want to miss this webinar. The subject is Mamdani's New York City, a warning to America. And we have an incredible panel. On the panel will be former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. We will have the brilliant young public intellectual and commentator from Prager University, Shabbos Kestenbaum. We will have Robert Spencer, who's been on this podcast before, great prolific author about Islam and the founder of Jihad Watch, and Rabbi Daniel Schoenbach, who has been so active in the anti-Mamdani activism in New York. He's also been on the podcast recently talking about that. So it's going to be a very exciting webinar hosted by yours truly next Sunday, this coming Sunday, August 16th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. in Israel. And you want to go to the link in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you are not watching on YouTube, you want to go to Israel365.com/Mamdani, Israel365.com/Mamdani, and we will include a link in the description of this podcast. So make sure you find that. Register. Mamdani's New York City, a warning to America, next Sunday.
So important. Make sure you subscribe to that and get on that, register for that, and be a part of that. It's going to be incredible. Well, Pesach, lots going on in the news, but we have an exciting guest to get to on today's show. Really excited. Her organization has been in the news per the EU and Canada and some other organizations that would like to do all sorts of fining and banning and don't particularly care for what they stand for. So let's introduce our guest and dive into this conversation.
Absolutely, Doug. Now, usually I would read a long bio, but for here, I'm going to read the description from the About Us page of Regavim's website. You understand the organization because Naomi is here really as one of the leaders and spokespeople for Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to the protection of Israel's national lands and resources. The Regavim movement acts to prevent illegal seizure of state land and to protect the rule of law and clean government in matters pertaining to land use policy in the state of Israel. The Regavim movement is active in the public, parliamentary, and judicial spheres through publication of opinion and research papers and through the dissemination of reports, policy and opinion papers, media communications, and when necessary, legal action. So they're not just putting out, content, in media, they're actually fighting the legal fight. We're going to hear more about that. Regavim's activities are directed toward accomplishing one mission, restoring the Zionist vision to its primary role in the Israeli policy process. As we see it, the Zionist vision is first and foremost an unapologetic Jewish vision, but at the same time, it is a vision grounded in humanist values, justice, and morality, values expressed in strict adherence to high ethical standards and clean government. And Naomi Khan is the director of the international division of Regavim. Naomi, welcome to the Shoulder podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So Naomi, I want to get started, get right into it. I just read the description of Regavim. I'm going to tell you from where I sit as someone who works in media and who pays attention to what's going on here, that Regavim's reports are indispensable to me. I remember you guys put out a report a couple years ago about how so many Palestinian Palestinian Authority police officers were actually also doubling as terrorists. That was such an important report, and it really, it put such important information out there. I think I made a video about it at the time. And the way you guys are always standing on the ramparts, because they don't realize that the battle for the land of Israel is ongoing on a daily basis. Because of all the things that have been done, all the ambiguity that was created by the Oslo process, and you guys are really at the forefront of defending the land of Israel. So I want to tee you up with just something that's been in the headlines lately. Apparently, Regavim has been sanctioned by the European Union. It's not the first time you were sanctioned. You were also sanctioned by the Biden administration. Oh, you were not. You were not. So you'll correct me. But I know that you guys have recently been sanctioned by the European Union and Canada joining that. Tell us the state of affairs there. What led to these sanctions? What are the sanctions all about? And what is Regavim doing about them? And then we'll circle back to some of the other issues you guys deal with.
Okay. So the sanctions are actually, if they weren't so serious, they'd be actually funny. But the European Union and the Canadian government have sanctioned Regavim not for anything that we've done per se that is illegal, not for anything that they can actually pursue in a court of law. So they've simply circumvented the entire judicial system and said, well, we don't like the results of what you do, and we don't like your policy, we don't like your goals, therefore we're going to sanction you. This is a tremendous threat, not only to civil society organizations in Israel, but to freedom of speech everywhere, essentially. And the reason it's important for me to correct your statement before about the Biden administration is because we were not actually sanctioned by the Biden administration, but we went to court. We sued the Biden administration for imposing sanctions on law-abiding organizations and for threatening to sanction us, even though they did not, but for infringing upon the freedom of speech of American Israelis, and threatening to infringe upon the freedom of movement, the freedom to act, the freedom, essentially the sovereignty and the judicial system of a democratic ally. And this is unprecedented. The Trump administration actually rescinded the sanctions that were imposed on Israeli nonprofits on the first day of President Trump's current term. But we continued with the lawsuit that we had together with actually a Christian evangelical community in the United States that joined us in suing the Biden administration for infringing on their freedom to host us, to support our work, to hear our opinion, to entertain the data that we collect, and for, in general, trying to stifle opinions with which they don't agree. So we came to a settlement with the U.S. government in which they said that they would not use the tool of sanctions against law-abiding organizations, civil society organizations in going forward, as this would infringe on Israeli sovereignty. And we felt that that was a very, very important statement. Of course, it's not binding on future administrations, but it is an important statement as it stands. But the Europeans simply disregarded all of that and disregarded the danger to freedom of speech and imposed these sanctions against us, claiming that they just could not handle the idea of us appealing to Israeli courts to enforce the law. And again, what we try to do is to get the Israeli government to uphold the law equally and universally. That should not be something that any democratic or supposedly peace-loving and freedom of speech-loving and human rights-loving organization should try to sanction. But that's precisely what they are doing now. So the sanctions are a very strange thing, and they relate essentially to our legal work regarding Judea and Samaria. But I just want to stress also that Regavim is active everywhere in the land of Israel that Israel has jurisdiction. That includes the Negev, where we are most famous, I think, for our attempts to resolve land use issues. It involves the Galilee and Jerusalem and everything in between, everywhere where the state of Israel has jurisdiction. And it includes Area C of Judea and Samaria, the section placed under full Israeli jurisdiction under the Oslo framework. So just to create the parameters there.
No, absolutely. Well, you
So,
said the
again,
sanctions were.
Yeah.
You said the sanctions were serious. Can you elaborate why they're serious? Why does your organization care what Europe thinks and what Canada thinks? You're concerned with Israeli sovereignty and Israel. So why is that an issue for you?
So the sanctions are essentially an economic tool. And what they do is prohibit businesses and companies, corporations, banks, credit cards, Google, Meta, Microsoft from doing business with sanctioned organizations like Regavim. So we lost access suddenly to our Google Drives, our Microsoft accounts, our emails. We also had our bank accounts frozen, even though it's illegal for Israeli banks to comply with European sanctions. Credit card companies would prefer to do business with Europe than with tiny little organizations of 25 people like Regavim. So they suspended our credit card abilities and our ability to do transactions, to pay salaries to members of our own staff who hold European citizenship. And they restricted our travel. So we cannot actually, our CEO cannot go to Europe to present our data, to speak to parliamentarians, to plead our case for Israeli sovereignty and for our own ability to collect, analyze, and publicize information. So those are all very, very serious things. The truth of the matter is that in terms of financial harm, people are not allowed to donate. People who hold European citizenship or have assets or bank accounts in Europe are not allowed to donate to support our work. If they do, they themselves can be sanctioned. So we've lost quite a bit of our donation stream. Again, we are a nonprofit that is supported completely by donations, or almost completely by donations. Some of it is legal fees for municipalities that we represent, but the vast majority is donations. And some of those donations come from the European Union or they come from Canada. And that's a problem, but it's costing us a lot more than what we're losing to fight this battle. But we believe that we're fighting this battle not just for ourselves and for our reputation and for the validity of our type of activism and for our goals, but also for the state of Israel as a whole. Because if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, what you have here is the European Union essentially saying anyone who doesn't agree with our vision for the future of Judea and Samaria is subject to sanctions. We will cut them off at the knees. And that means any member of Israel's government that votes against a Palestinian state, for example, as did 99 members of Knesset this past year. Anybody who serves in the IDF, and the IDF is carrying out the policy set forth by the government itself, anyone can be sanctioned at any time, and there's no way to foresee it. So the European Union has placed itself beyond or above our judicial system, our political system, and our individual and national rights. And that's a very big problem. So even though it's costing us fortunes of money that we don't have to fight these sanctions, we are fighting them in the name of freedom of speech, and we are fighting them in the name of Israeli sovereignty.
Naomi, I want to now educate our audience a bit about some of the issues that you're actually dealing with. They got the big picture, and we know that you're fighting for Judea and Samaria, but I know that you guys are monitoring and fighting things like illegal construction, foreign interference by foreign governments interfering in what's going on the ground in Judea and Samaria, and other such things. Could you give us a few anecdotes and real life situations that that we can bite off and chew so that our audience can really understand what Regavim is doing?
Sure. So, as I started out with, Regavim champions equal and universal enforcement of the law. What is the law in Judea and Samaria? Essentially, the Oslo framework created a legal framework in which both the Palestinian Authority and the State of Israel are supposed to operate towards creating a space for peaceful coexistence of some kind. It's important for your viewers to understand that the Oslo Accords do not what they don't say, and that's unfortunately been, I think, buried under so much of the static in the past 25 years. The Oslo Accords never say anything about a Palestinian state. What they say is that it will create a possibility for self-rule for the Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria, and create a pathway towards a negotiated resolution, whatever that may be. So you can either support or not support the idea of full statehood for Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria, but either way, there is a legal framework that both sides committed to. The Palestinian Authority has been, since the day that those accords were signed in 1995, since that day has been violating those accords. That should come as no surprise to anyone, but it has violated every single clause in those accords, everything from developing its own water sources, developing its sewage treatment, dealing with education, reducing or removing incitement and anti-Semitism from their curricula, creating a system of health care, education and welfare for the people under its jurisdiction, creating housing solutions, building a future. Not one single one of those things has been done, despite the fact that the Palestinian Authority has been, since the day it was created, the largest per capita recipient of foreign aid in the world. So where's all that foreign aid going? We asked ourselves that question as well. And what we see on the ground as we do our work, and we have field coordinators out on the ground every day to see what's happening. And what we see is that the Palestinian Authority, since 2009, publicly in a declared program of creating a de facto state called the Fayyad Plan, since 2009, the Palestinian Authority has used those massive resources simply to annex, physically take over Area C, the area placed under full Israeli jurisdiction. Today, there are over 103,000 illegal structures built by the Palestinian Authority with foreign money on Area C, on state land.
Whoa, hold on, pause. Naomi, did you say 103,000 structures?
Correct. Yes.
I mean, what that is per capita of the people is insane because we're talking about buildings here. Right. And also the whole area isn't that large. You're talking 103,000 structures in Area C. Let me just make sure everyone understands this. Area C,
give them the A, B,
in
and
the
C,
Oslo Accords, there's Area A, which is right. A is full Palestinian Authority control. B is some sort of mixed blend. And then C is full Israeli sovereignty. But a lot of that is open hills, open valleys, open areas. And and what we have now is over 103,000
yes.
illegal structures built by the Palestinian Authority on Area C. Right. In order to kind of like just expand what's part of the Palestinian Authority. It's an illegal seizure of what's supposed to be under Israeli sovereignty. Okay, I'm sorry I had to pause you just to make sure that that's settled in. All right, sorry I cut you off. Keep going.
Let me give you an even more mind-boggling statistic. This is a fact, right? And this is what we do. We measure, we document every single structure. We investigate if it's legal, if it has permits, if it's not, who built it, who's funding it, who's living in it, since when, what the status of the land is. But we took a step back at one point and we said, well, the leftist organizations and the European Union and Peace Now and certain American governments will say, well, of course the Palestinians build illegally in Area C. They have to live somewhere, and Israel doesn't give them building permits. So we said, okay, let's check this out. Why are they building in Area C? So we actually did an aerial survey of areas A and B, the areas under Palestinian Authority control. And what we found was that 67%, nearly 70% of the land already under Palestinian Authority jurisdiction is empty, ready for development. No need for Israeli involvement whatsoever. But instead, they use all of their resources to take over areas. So why does Israel not give permits to Arabs to build in Area C? The whole concept of the Oslo division was that they wouldn't have to. If you want to divide the territory between the two peoples, stop mixing the populations, right? So those 103,000 structures are not just a massive quantity. They're also a massively threatening quality because they're built along the back fences of existing Israeli communities. They're built to cut Judea and Samaria off from the rest of Israel. They're built to create a land bridge between areas of Palestinian Authority control and to threaten Israel's eastern border with Jordan. So all of these things are strategically placed, massively funded, and have taken over huge chunks of the areas under Israeli jurisdiction. Those are facts that cannot be denied.
Well,
there are various
can I ask a
things
question
that
just to clarify?
Palestinian Authority does. Sure.
So how many, I read an article and I was trying to find it here. How many of those are just spontaneously, they're happen to build there? And how much of it is strategic, that the Palestinian Authority is actually strategically building in Area C? And how much of it is just by mistake or spontaneous and it just sort of happens?
Okay. So if it were spontaneous and just sort of happens, then people would build not in places where there's a threat of demolition, not in places where they are under constant surveillance of the IDF or under a constant threat of roadblocks and blockades and access problems and all of those things. They would build in the 67% of areas A and B that are empty, available, and they would have no need for any contact whatsoever with Israeli authorities. They would not be subject to the IDF or to the civil administration. They would have full access to their schools and their hospitals and their community centers that are run by the Palestinian Authority. So when you look at the map, and this is what we do, we create maps, and you see where these 103,000 structures are, it becomes very, very clear that they're strategic. But we're no geniuses. We don't need to figure this out. You know why? Because the Palestinian Authority declares publicly exactly what it is going to do, and then it does it. In 2009, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority announced that the Oslo framework was no longer binding, would not be respected, and areas A and B are the exact same as area C, and all that remains to create a Palestinian state is to ignore the Oslo obligations that it undertook and to simply take over physically Area C. The European Union began helping the Palestinian Authority in 2009 and 2010 plan out the entire area of Judea and Samaria for a Palestinian state. They have whole planning regimes that completely ignore the existence of Israeli communities, of IDF bases, of security elements, of any borders with other countries, simply wiped it all out, planned out the entire Palestinian state there, and now slowly but surely are populating those plans. So it's not as if, all the Israeli government needed to do was to listen to what the Palestinians said, believe that they meant what they said, and take them at their word they were going to do what they said, which is exactly what they're doing.
Naomi, you mentioned the funding. You said they're very well funded, and you mentioned that the EU started helping them.
Yes.
So talk about the funding, like the money trail of what's behind all this, where it's coming from, which countries are involved, or what entities are involved in that funding apparatus. And then if you could talk about what responsibility the Israeli government has for letting this happen, meaning we are there, and if you're aware of it, if Regavim's aware of it, then the IDF's aware of it, then the Israeli government's aware of it. And is this just a matter of Israel not having the will to enforce its will on the situation?
I'll start from the first question, the funding. First of all, it's not hard to follow the money trail when the European Union stamps each one of these illegal structures with a sponsorship sign. And we found some sponsorship signs all over Judea and Samaria declaring that this structure was funded, created, built supported by the European Union. So all you have to do is
So they don't even hide it. They're
quite
they
the
don't.
opposite. They believe that putting an EU sticker on the side of an illegal structure will give it diplomatic protection. And in many, many cases, they are absolutely right. Because the state of Israel, and this is the answer to your second question, the state of Israel, it's not just they don't have the will. Even when they have the will, there is very, very serious international pressure. When Israel does pull down a structure, and this is very rare, or it was at least until the current government came into power. On the rare occasions where Israel did pull down an illegal structure, the West Bank Protection Consortium of the European Union, it's a consortium of the eight main member states of the EU, they actually tried to sue the state of Israel for compensation. And they actually threatened to bring Israel up on war crimes charges for pulling down illegal structures that they built on Israeli state land without permits. And this has been going on for years. No one's been reporting it, but we've been actually suing the government of Israel for failing to take responsibility, either to prevent the construction or to actually enforce the law against it when it does slip through the net. So we've gone to court many dozens of times. We choose sort of exemplar cases. So, for example, a case that many people may have heard of, it's been in the news for over nearly 20 years, and that is Khan al-Ahmar. It's a small collection of structures on Highway 1, the highway that leads from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. And this illegal collection of shacks, huts, whatever. It's built in the sewage drainage ravine of an Israeli community, literally abutting the main highway. Most of the people who were living in this illegal encampment came to an agreement with the State of Israel. The State of Israel gave them free plots of land and developed plots of land for their relocation so that they would not continue to squat on the side of the road, even though, again, these are not Israeli citizens. They are under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority, but the State of Israel came to an agreement with them. And the last few holdouts there became the champions of a huge campaign funded by the European Union. EU lawyers come to court to defend, to force, essentially, these people to remain in these subhuman conditions because it is a tremendous leverage point against the State of Israel. So this collection of illegal structures with EU symbols on the side and constant visits by diplomats from Europe and all kinds of international campaigns is still standing there, even though 6 times the High Court of Justice has found that the people who are living there are not Israel's responsibility. They are living there illegally. The land is state land. It does not belong to them. They've never claimed that it does. But in any case, they're still there because massive international pressure has kept the State of Israel from risking being taken up on war crimes charges if they remove them. So now that Israel has already been brought up on war crimes charges, we're asking the next question. What are they going to do to us next? All the things they've threatened, they did anyway. So it's time for Israel to actually do what needs to be done, to behave like a grown-up country, to take our future by the horns and say, this is a country of law and order. We have a justice system. We have rules. If the other side's not going to obey them, or they're not going to respect them, we're going to at least uphold them on our side and start doing that. So that's what we try to do in our legal actions. We try to force the government of Israel to stand up and take responsibility.
And why do you think it is
And
that
Europeans don't like it?
Yeah, why do you think it is that the Europeans don't want to hear the facts that you have to present? I understand they don't like it. I understand they've already they've got their money on a certain horse in the race, but ultimately, why don't they want to hear the information that you're going to present? Are they unaware? Are they ignorant? Do they really just want to stick their head in the ground about it? What is so disconcerting about the information you would bring to the table?
Well, first of all, just on the surface, our reports prove that they've bet on the wrong horse. They've become so heavily invested in that horse that they can no longer see any other way forward. They have invested against the state of Israel and in the idea of Palestinian statehood for so long. They have no other card that they want to play. They have no other vision other than that one. And that vision will involve the destruction of the Jewish state. There is no question about it. They're not even talking about, at this point, it's now, they're not even talking about a two-state solution generally. They're talking about a one-state solution, and that one state has no room for Jews. If you say you support a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, look at a map. There's nothing between the river and the sea. There's nothing else other than the state of Israel. And if you replace that with a Palestinian state, what you're essentially saying is that you are in favor of wiping out the Jewish state and disappearing all of the Jewish people who live here and not allowing any more to come. But why are they so invested in this? I'll tell you. I think I'm among friends here, and I'll tell you what my theory is. I don't think it's actually a theory. Why is there so much anti-Israel sentiment? What is the story behind this red-green alliance is what everyone's calling it, right? How is it possible that jihadist Islamic Sharia-supporting fanatics on one side are teaming up with raging extreme left anarchist liberals on the other side? It just makes no sense in the real world, right? There's one thing that they have in common, and the thing that they have in common is everything that the state of Israel stands for. We are a nation state of an ancient people with a distinct identity. They can't stand that. We are a faith-based people. They can't stand that. We are a family-oriented country. They can't stand that. All of the things that both of these sides detest come together in what Israel is. And so we are the enemy. But if the West doesn't wake up and realize what it is that they are supporting, they're essentially pulling the rug out from under their own feet. Because the things that make Israel unique are the things that serve as the foundation for Western civilization. And it's in danger.
Yeah, Naomi, speaking of the endangering of Western civilization, one issue that you guys also deal with that's very close to my heart is the issue of protecting biblical archaeology. I think it's a massive miss by the state of Israel that more resources haven't been put into this. Let me explain what I'm talking about. A lot of our audience probably is not aware that there is an academic boycott against biblical archaeology coming out of Judea and Samaria. That means that if some young archaeologist decides to do a study of a site in Judea and Samaria from the Hebrew Bible, he could find himself, losing his job. He's going to have a hard time getting that paper published. And this might seem like a sort of quirky issue, like we have bigger fish to fry, but it's actually very important because what it means is that in the official records in academia, they try to erase the record of Jewish history and biblical history in the land of Israel. And this is an ongoing fight. I know it's been going on. I know that the Heritage Ministry was trying to get involved in it at some point. I don't know exactly where things stand, but you guys have been involved in this as well because our enemies know this, and they've been trying to undermine the biblical archaeology in Judea and Samaria. What can you tell us about this issue and what Regavim's involved with right now?
So Regavim's involvement is a very, very natural offshoot of our field work. The way we work is we are out on the ground, as I mentioned, every single day, seeing what's going on all through the country. But in Judea and Samaria, think about it for a moment. This area, it's a very small piece of planet Earth, and it is the most dense in archaeology of any place in the world. This is where the Bible actually happened. This is, you scratch the ground. My kids used to go out into the backyard when our neighborhood was still new and scratch around in the dirt, and they would come up with clay seals, 2,000 years old, and pieces of Iron Age pottery and whatever. This is where it happened, and this is where we are. So the idea that the Israel Antiquities Authority has no jurisdiction over what is known as the Green Line, the areas that were occupied illegally by Jordan for 19 years, is outrageous. Because this is, there's not a whole lot of archaeology in Tel Aviv, but there is archaeology in Shiloh and in Jerusalem and in Eli and in all the places here. I mean, my looking out my window right here on this side, I'm looking at where the sun stood still in Givon. This is where it happened. That is what my neighborhood is. All the battles of the Hasmonean dynasty happened just in the fields just outside of my window over here. So it's important, but our field coordinators, when they're out in the field monitoring illegal construction, also see what is happening to archaeological sites that are either unprotected, insufficiently protected, or have been placed through incredible stupidity and short-sightedness and naivete in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority has systematically erased the physical record of the Jewish connection to Judea and Samaria in hundreds of cases. There are things that are explicit in the Oslo framework, a full annex of areas of sites of tremendous historical importance to the Jewish people that were placed for safekeeping in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. If I describe to you what they have done to some of these places, you won't believe me. The site of Joshua's altar, for example, parts of the retaining wall of one of the most ancient cultic sites in Israel, the place where the covenant was renewed as the Israelites entered into the land of Israel, was ground up to make gravel for condominiums on the site of Joshua's altar by the Palestinian Authority. I was there and saw with my own eyes Palestinian Arabs barbecuing on Joshua's altar. The disregard is fatal. The abuse of the trust in which that was placed in their hands is unspeakable. And the state of Israel has, in the hope of somehow or other gaining international favor, respected the Palestinian Authority's jurisdiction. And that has caused catastrophic destruction of irreplaceable archaeological sites. The Palestinian Authority purposely builds illegally or legally on sites of incredible archaeological finds and tremendous religious and historical significance. And unfortunately, the United Nations and UNESCO are complicit in this. So they are now renaming some of our most sacred places as Palestinian heritage sites, including the Cave of the Patriarchs, including the Temple Mount, including Solomon's Pools, where they want to now build a mosque, including the list goes on and on. So these are things that we come across during our fieldwork, and we have demanded that the government of Israel certainly take responsibility for the areas that are in Israeli jurisdiction, but also to demand, certainly from their benefactors in Europe, that they cease and desist from supporting this travesty and this violation of biblical history.
You said seeing with your own eyes, and I think that's so important. You can see these things with your own eyes. I have had the privilege of leading now almost 10 trips to Israel. I've brought close to 1,000 people, and a number of those are pastors who have come for the very first time. About half of those are pastors. I've had the privilege of being there, watching their eyes be opened and seeing things for the first time, and touching the soil and standing in places where these amazing things happen. If you were to take a group of pastors, what would be the one thing you would show them to help them understand what you're illustrating and talking about? What site would you take them to? What place would you take them to so they could see it with their own eyes?
Oh, that's very tough. I'll tell you, I recently took some very dear friends, Christians from Texas, out to Netiv HaAvot in Gush Etzion. So Gush Etzion, as you approach Jerusalem from the south, just outside of Neve Daniel, there's a site that, first of all, there's Roman milestones there marking the path to Jerusalem. And there are ritual baths, public ritual baths, that are unlike anything you've ever seen. mikvahs, right? But these were public
I've been
mikvahs.
there. I've seen them.
The unusual thing about them isn't that it's a mikvah. What's unusual about it is it's a mikvah not near any community. There was no village around it. It was there simply for the pilgrims' use. This was the last stop before they ascended to Jerusalem. It's, as the crow flies, it's about 2.5 miles outside of Jerusalem. This was the last stop where people on their way up to the Temple Mount would stop, immerse themselves, prepare themselves physically and spiritually to ascend to the holiest place on earth for us. And it's still there, and it's still intact. And the only reason it's still intact, and the only reason that you can stand there and look at the Temple Mount and look at the old city from there, see where you're going, see where you've come from, is because Israel is in charge. And therefore, when you look in the direction that the pilgrims traveled, you see churches and you see mosques, and they're all functioning and they're all preserved and protected. But that's only because they're under Israeli jurisdiction. When they're not, for example, the monastery of St. George on the other side of Jerusalem, every time there's Muslim rule, the monastery has to be abandoned. So they had to open within the sanctuary of the old city walls a sister monastery. But as soon as Israeli rule, Jewish rule returns to the area, religious life is once again reinstored for all religions. So I would take them to those places, to the path of the patriarchs of the pilgrimage, just south of Jerusalem, and to St. George's Monastery, carved into the rock of the mountains east of Jerusalem, and see what commitment to freedom of religion looks like to us.
Naomi, you just raised such a beautiful and important point, and I want to underscore it for everyone listening here, and that is that what you guys are doing, trying to, working to protect the Jewish sovereignty, the Israeli sovereignty of these places in Judea and Samaria is not just about, and for anyone who's considering, are you going to support Regavim or, check out their website and see how you can get involved, understand that you're defending biblically based Western civilization. Every Jew and Christian, every Bible-believing person who understands that the Bible is our heritage, the Bible is our history, the Bible is where we all come from, Jews and Christians alike, that these places and what they mean and what they are is under threat by those who seek to destroy all of that history. So you guys are actually defending not just the Jewish people or the land of Israel or the state of Israel. You're really defending biblically based civilization against the same onslaught that is trying to destroy it throughout Europe and in other places in the world. When you brought up the Red Green Alliance before, I thought to myself, wait a second, what does it have to do with Judea and Samaria? But you're absolutely right, because in the big picture, what you guys are doing is about, it's about the Bible. It's about God's land and what that means to all of us.
Agreed? Absolutely. We come across a very strange combination of forces all the time. We have EU-funded, quote-unquote, nonprofits. They're actually foreign agent civil society organizations operating in Israel that feed information back to the European Union. And that information is used to defame Israel, to demonize every person living here, to demoralize Israelis and their supporters, to undermine the entire the validity of Zionism as a concept. And so these are far left organizations that are in full alliance with the Islamists. And that combination wouldn't make sense anywhere else, but it's our lived reality here every day.
Wow. As our time is winding down, several of our listeners, I'm sure, are going to want to go to your website. They're going to want to connect with you on social media and elsewhere. Give them your kind of handles, your website, where they can go to support and all that information.
Great. Thank you. So our website is regavim.org, regavim.org. We're very active on social media. Look for Regavim ENG, as in English, Regavim ENG on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. I think we're also on TikTok. I try to stick away from that, but I have very bright, very young people who try to get our messages out on those platforms as well. They're a bit scary to me. I come from an academic background. So for me, anything less than 6,000 words is a soundbite. And for them, anything more than 60 words is a novel. So we don't meet in the middle. So,
well, Naomi, let me just add for everyone also that the website is not just like a kind of empty organization website with an About Us page. It's much more than that. There are studies there, all the issues that you guys cover, recent news items about what you guys are doing. There's a lot of information. This is a very important organization. Anyone who's involved in advocacy for Israel, who cares about Israel, who's praying for the nation of Israel and the land of Israel, Regavim is an organization you got to keep your eye on and get plugged into. I'm so honored that you joined us today, Naomi. I hope we'll have you back in the future when there's more headlines about what you guys are up to.
Thank you. I hope there'll be good headlines for a change. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, rate, and share this podcast. Subscribe on Patreon. Come on over to Facebook, like our page, join our group. So we would love to connect with more and more of our shoulder to shoulder family. And we'll see you on our next episode.